You're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. Welcome to the program. Today we're back in Netanya in Israel talking to Evan Thomas, pastor of a congregation called Beit Asaph. The COVID pandemic has made it difficult, even impossible, for people to meet in groups. So I was interested to know how Evan has managed to keep his fellowship alive and active during this time.
When we go back to the earlier part of 2020, when the virus began to take hold around the country and the word pandemic began to have its effect, like in every nation, people went through fear, uncertainty, experiencing what lockdown meant, what was required of people. In such a mixed community like in Israel, where you have so many immigrants who are also struggling to understand what's going on because of maybe language limitations, it was very hard and really had a very deep negative impact on congregational life. And of course, the first to suffer are those that are isolated because they might be elderly, typically of what you would have experienced in Great Britain. And so, you're on the phone a lot with people. Then we began to become more aware of and capable in using media like Zoom. And we began to have prayer meetings and even some services that we had quite enthusiastically because people were so, after a few months, so starving for fellowship. But we saw over a period of time that using Zoom to try and have fellowship life really had a life as well. And you saw the drop-off rate. So we looked to, other creative ways of putting messages out there, creating networks with WhatsApp and so on. So we're remaining in contact as much as we could. And there, whenever possible, doing a certain amount of visitation, even if it was to somebody's door to drop off a few goods or something to cheer people up, just helping in whatever way we could. When it came to services, there was in the middle of last year, there was some indication that we'd be able to have some services, but they were largely restricted to, I think, up to 50 people with, masks and just social distancing and so on. And we were able to probably have 4 or 5 of those services in the middle of the year, and then the ability to have those began to drop off. Holding on to an expensive, large facility really became unwieldy, and we began to explore the possibility of being able to break the contract. As I was seeking the Lord about it, the Lord began to give me a picture of what He would like us to do as a community. And I began to create a working document where we would shift the primary life of the congregation into what we called life groups. And that's exactly what we have done. Our landlord was able to let us out of our contract. And so by the end of March this year, we abandoned our congregational facility and took out a lease on a small facility where we could have prayer meetings, where we could have administrative office, we could have teaching seminars for up to 15, 20 people. And that has proved itself to have been a very, very wise decision economically for us, and also to help people begin the journey of getting used to fellowship life locationally in the various languages of the congregation, in these life groups where we were attending one last night, and I think there were 13 of us there, 13 or 14 of us. 15 would probably be a large group. Some of the groups is 6, 8, 10 folk gathering together every week, many of them on a Shabbat or Friday evening, many of them with kids involved, and they have proved to be very effective. We've also been able to train people in how to lead effective Bible studies in groups like that so that we can really enjoy growing in confidence, each one of us, in being able to facilitate. And in fact, the night before last, we had a class in Hebrew. I think we had 11 students there, and really getting into the technical abilities of preparing systematic Bible discussions, being able to lead them and deliver them in effective, interesting ways. And this is what we're doing with folk. It's great. You see them really beginning to do life together. And then what our desire is to supplement that with a full service, perhaps once a month, whenever possible.
That's brilliant, Evan, because it's always been your heart to train people up, hasn't it? You've been doing that for years and years.
Exactly.
So here you are now. It's as if this has been the opportunity to put that into practice.
Exactly. The old paradigm of your Shabbat service, where one of you takes the role of preaching and a worship team, and everything happens from the stage, so to speak, is now goes into the home. Everybody's sharing responsibility, and what we do is it's a bit like fishing. I'm a fisherman. And so you have two options. You can go out and catch fish and then spread the joy around and give people the fruit of your catch. Or you can teach people how to fish. And that's, in a very simplistic way is what we're doing. So it becomes more relevant and applicable for people, and they're fellowshipping in their locations and their neighborhoods where they live. They're doing life together. And of course, with social media like WhatsApp, we remain pretty close contact with one another as a congregation.
Have other congregations done something similar, or are you unique in this?
There is a general reluctance to do that. Many pastors, even today, are really going, we're just going to wait it out until whatever they can will carry on with Shabbat services, even with very restricted numbers, under all sorts of duress. I don't get it. We're a little bit pioneering in this area, but there are many that are looking at it and have certainly reinforced their home groups and small groups, but most are reluctant to go that next step and really, really de-emphasize that main service. We're not ruling it out. It's a juxtaposition. It's not the primary life. The primary life is in the life groups with a celebration service periodically, and where preaching is very important, and all of these things that we're used to.
It's a little bit like the early church pattern, isn't it, where they were meeting in their homes and then coming together for the feasts?
That's what I patented it on, Julia. And so within those life groups, for example, I insist on seeing the four basic elements of studying the word together, fellowship, which involves several things of like worshiping wherever possible, praying together, and breaking of bread, of taking the Lord's table together to remember the Lord. Those four elements are part of every one of those life group gatherings.
Now, you were also very involved in humanitarian aid. Is that now a part of the life group situation, or how have you made that work in Netanya?
Those things continue within Beit Asaph itself. Now there are numbers of our congregants involved in those things, but they're basically being taken care of by parachurch organizations, which there are also here in Netanya and surrounding, and some of our congregants also, joining as volunteers to, I would say, broader society humanitarian aid programs. So, yeah, it carries on, but because we don't actually have a facility to be able to have somewhere where people come to, these kind of things, that we actually don't do it primarily ourselves, although we encourage our members to take part.
So if the pandemic was to finish tomorrow and you could all go back to normal, would you go back to the old way of doing things, or are you going to continue with your new programme?
I, for one, will be holding out to developing the present paradigm, I believe really is the future. Um, even now there is still lots of pressure to go back to the old way. I don't want to do that. And as long as I can, I'm going to hold out for carrying on the way we are now. I believe it's far more relevant, certainly in our cultural setting, and puts people much more in touch with the neighbors and neighborhoods. One of the things that we love to do once a month is what we call worship in the garden. And so we will gather as much as 50 of us. So it could be people from several life groups will come together in a large garden of one of our families and worship together for an hour or so, and then take the Lord's table. And, so it really, you're doing it right in the heart of the community, and you're not relegated to a facility, a worship facility. So in the meantime, I don't want to go back to the old way. And who knows, this may be a precursor for something much deeper, this present pandemic. And if we needed to, like in many other parts of the world, we could go underground.
You've been listening to Evan Thomas, pastor of a congregation in Israel, giving us plenty of food for thought. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work and receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please visit our website, olivetreefund.org. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.